So this is the Cluster API subgroup meeting of Wednesday, April 4th. This is a meeting of the hosted by SIG Cluster Lifecycle. It looks like we have a few things on the agenda today. If you guys have other topics you want to discuss, start adding them to the agenda, but I'm just going to start with what's there. First up is Rodrigo is talking about test infra, and I don't think he's able to make it. But he filled me in apparently yesterday during the main SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting. Kubeadm has a plan to go GA on this release, so 1.11, and they, I think, want to take a hard dependency on testing with Cluster API, so using Cluster API to deploy machinery to test Kubeadm. And they're basically looking for help on how to get this up and running as quick as possible, and they need some volunteers to help drive this area. And so I'm just relaying this information. If you are interested in this, you can talk to Tim St. Clair. But do we have anyone interested in this? I'm unsure of what all tests they want to be able to run, but I assume it's some subset of the current core Kubernetes end-to-end suite. Okay, I will just mention and yeah, we hope to have a meeting with InchPod later today and see where they can help out, but someone who is heavily involved with Cluster API participating would be greatly appreciated. Okay, moving on, the next one I added, this is about the repo migration. So we're moving to the, or moving part of what's in the kubedeploy repo to the Kubernetes SIG/Cluster API repo. I have taken upon myself to configure the K8 redirector for all Kubernetes SIGs repos, so we should have a redirect now. We have to decide if we want to use it, and I was hoping we could just get consensus in this meeting and make a decision on that so we can move forward with the migration. There was, I believe, Chris Love, who filed the issue, noted that she doesn't think we need to use it. She's perfectly fine using github.com/kubernetes-sig/cluster-API. But I thought we would follow the convention of what most of Kubernetes is doing and using the vanity domains. But I was just wanting to get a decision on this. What do people think about that?
From my experience, if you use the K8, the Kubernetes IO, it's much better because, for example, in China, the GitHub is banned from time to time, and it's very hard to get some dependencies at least for them. And as a workaround, if GitHub is down, you can redirect to Bitbucket or something else. So
I suppose we could. Anyone else disagree with using the vanity domain?
I think that's good. I think we probably want to just check in with folks like Chris. I know Robert's out for a while too. People who may have strong opinions there. I don't know.
I've talked to Robert about this, and I think he was for it, but Chris registered her opinion on the issue, and double check it was, I don't think it was a strong position, just a slight preference. Oh, it may be stronger than I remember. Her argument was that she wants to keep it as literal as possible. The K8.io redirect is a bit confusing to a newcomer, And furthermore, there's a bit of magic linking the two together. And if you don't know about it, it could be hard to trace what her concerns. And she said if we switch hosting providers later on, we could use tools like setting grep to update our code bases as needed.
Well, the same thing applies for the main Kubernetes or the client and the API and all those reports. So it's the same thing.
The confusion is already there in the code base.
Yeah.
All right, that's also a good point. So I'm going, unless there are no strong objections, then I'm just going to put a stake in the ground and say we are going to use the vanity URL. Speak up if you disagree on the issue by no later than 5 p.m. Pacific time today, or I'm going to close it with that decision. Okay? Awesome. All right. Moving on to the next item. Just record that. Next item is the machine deployments PR. Just a notification that went in. Mason, do you want to talk more about that? What's the progression of this? What happens next?
So this introduces the types. We still have to write the controller. I'll create a GitHub issue to track that. Yeah, that's. I think either I'll probably pick it up if no one else wants to.
Is anyone else interested in working with Mason on that, either helping author it or review it?
I can help with the review. I kind of overrode it for actual development, but at least I can help with checking something else.
Okay. Okay. The next item is also mine. There was some discussion in the channel about have we been in touch with the people doing the CloudProvider migration out of the main repo? And for those of you who don't know what that is, there's an effort going on in the main Kubernetes repo to take out all the CloudProvider specific code into separate repos, and then separating what is currently the controller manager into the CloudProvider agnostic controllers, and then a CloudProvider controller manager that can selectively be selectively compiled against whatever cloud provider it needs to be deployed with. There was a question about how involved or how much overlap there is with what we're doing. Excuse me, and whether we should be getting in on the early ground of this. And I had a meeting yesterday with Walter Fender, the engineer in the API machinery who is being tasked to lead this effort. And from what I've gathered, right now it is the cloud provider repos are meant solely for just the controllers, just the controller logic for the core Kubernetes types, and it's not quite sure where, like, what is technically, cluster API is technically considered like an add-on API, not mandatory to run Kubernetes, and it's unclear how we would fit in that model. And also from discussion, they are still very early in the process, and given some of the release guarantees and compatibility guarantees, it's going to be a very slow process. Like, I think they're targeting to get the cloud provider code deleted, I think, by release 1.15. And I'm personally of the opinion that given all the technical challenges they have to face with migrating that code and the speed with which they have to go, it's not a good place for us right now because we're still in the rapid prototyping phase. And I mean, and that's going beyond the question of if it's the right place. Even if it were the right place, I don't think it would be the right place right now. And so I had that meeting with them yesterday, and I'm just reporting back that status. Does anyone have any questions about that? Okay. There's something in chat. Jess says, nope, that sounds good. Okay. Consensus from the crowd. All right, moving on to the last item in the agenda. Warning, last item. If you have anything you want to talk about, please add it. Rodrigo added another item, and he's also not here. Oh, great. So the stable alpha API milestone. There was a discussion about stable API. I'm going to bring that up real quick. About the stable API milestone and all the things we want to get to what we consider, what we intend to be the final alpha release, even if there's still some very minor non-breaking tweaks. We want to get to that fairly quickly here. If there are any things that you consider need to be changed about the current API for an alpha release, please put it in that milestone or ask someone to put it in that milestone if you don't have permissions. One thing Rodrigo wanted to block the stable API was getting the API validated from the autoscaler team to make sure that it would suit their needs, or we had plans to suit their needs. And that's part of that is the machine class PR that Robbie put out. It doesn't mean that we have to put the machine class in the alpha release. It means that, for instance, my comment of like the available capacity would be better represented as on the machine as what capacity kubelet could reserve. And so that would be an actual change to a type that we want to have in the alpha API, whereas changes to machine class might not necessarily be in the initial alpha v1. Does that make sense?
I mean, alpha APIs are, I mean, if you look at the documentation and the API conventions, they are, I mean, there is no guarantee that they will be stable at any point. So,
yeah, but at some point we need to cut an alpha v1, and then breaking changes can go in alpha v2. And I think Rodrigo was just wanting some consensus on what alpha v1 should be, and just making sure that we can satisfy autoscalers cases with just the basic types that we have. Like, if more types need to be added on later, that's fine, but no major changes to the basic types for that. And he wanted to block on that, which, if I recall, I have a meeting with the autoscaler team. They're actually coming to Seattle in a couple weeks. So I hope to hammer that out with them and get agreement that we have everything they need.
Is Robert coming back by this time, or is he on vacation, if you know?
I do not think he's going to be back by that time. I think he'll be back later in April, like late April, but I'm uncertain about that.
Because especially for the machine class, he put some things like the template for the actual machine there. So I mean, I'm not sure what his exact thoughts were about this thing. So I don't know.
You put the template for the actual machine there?
Yeah.
In the provider config?
I mean, no. In the actual class is as a field, like the template for the entire machine. So I'm not sure what he was planning to do with it.
He put a machine spec in the machine class.
Let me just see.
Sorry, I'm going through and finding the PR now too, to see what he did, because that worries me actually. I see that he added a machine class reference to the provider config source.
Yeah, yeah.
And he also had some weird parameters in the machine class ref, which I think might be problematic.
I mean, if you look at the cluster autoscaler, they'll pretty much want like CPU. They want memory, optionally like the GPU, all those resources that are in the core v1 resource what was called list, and based on those things, they can pretty much say that they want to have a machine with this exact things, and then all the additional parameters like the Kubeadm version and etc. They don't care about these things. So
yeah, that's the discussion. They have the capacity field of the machine class, which is just the resource list. And I was saying that they should combine that with some sort of specification on the machine itself with the reservation, like how much kubelet will reserve for that specific machine set or machine deployment. And that's what they should care about. But the other versions, you're right, they don't care about like kubelet version or anything like that. Are you talking about the to-do where he says there's maybe a machine template reference?
yeah.
Okay, I see what you're talking about. The thing that's commented out that he said maybe too. Okay, we can discuss that in the PR. I'm not sure he feels strongly one way or another about this, as long as we get something that satisfies the autoscaler team. And he did this, I think, kind of in like a last-minute rush before his vacation, just to get it out there.
Yeah, we can fine-tune it more or less.
Yeah, I'll go back over this later today and respond to all your comments. Maybe we can have a good discussion about this. All right. If there's nothing else on the auto-scaling stuff and the stable alpha API. All right. Okay. If there's no other topics, anyone? I guess we can end this early then. All right. Thank you for joining the Cluster API meeting. I guess we'll see you guys next week.